Why, hello there, old sports. Now, if you are familiar with this channel, you might be wondering why I'm suddenly making Deltarune videos all of a sudden. And the answer is that it's because I'm on the spectrum. That's probably it, to be honest. The Deltarune autism brain rot has consumed me. Moving on, today I'd like to talk about how chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune absolutely subverted our expectations. Or at least mine. Because, now obviously when I say our, I'm referring to myself and a good chunk of the fandom. Because in all honesty, I'm sure some people didn't fall into the pits I'm about to discuss. But I'm not sure how much of the fandom that was. Because, I don't know, maybe like most of the fandom didn't think of this way and I'm just sounding like an idiot right now. That's always completely possible, folks. What I'm trying to get at is that before chapters 3 and 4 were released, I feel like at least a majority of the fandom believed that we knew at least the vague way the rest of the game would play out, or at least how the middle chapters would play out. At the start of the chapter, we'd find out someone made a dark fountain, and we'd go in, find out about some leader of the world who is appointed by or is just associated with the Knight. From there, we'd be able to fight a boss who held a shadow crystal and who had been driven mad by some mysterious figure. Then, after helping some character, maybe one of our classmates, through their character arc, we'd fight the Dark World leader in an arena with a dead pixel before sealing the fountain, going home, and seeing some Chris do some spooky stuff before cutting to the credits. Now, that little description was something I kind of put together after Chapter 2, seeing how it mimicked Chapter 1 so much in terms of structure. Obviously, most of us assumed that at some point during maybe Chapters 6 and 7, we'd get some more plot-driven stuff relating to Gaster, the Bunker, Des, the Knight, Asriel, the Roaring, all that good stuff. But I'm confident in saying that no one in their right mind, then again, we're Deltarune fans, who is in our right mind? I'm confident that saying no one in their right mind would have expected the Knight to come out of nowhere in Chapter 3, kill one of the main characters, sort of, and then just have a fight with us, just randomly, and then also make that fight actually winnable for some reason, and then they just screw off. Because, I'm gonna be honest, Chapter 3 did a pretty good job of feeling like Chapters 1 and 2 to some extent. Because you kind of went through the world, you kind of got to bond with Tenna in a similar way that you did with Queen, and then we all knew we were going to end up fighting Tenna at some point. It just felt like we were kind of going through some different motions, and that's completely fine. But then, out of nowhere, the Knight just comes in, and then the Knight is the secret boss, because I'm going to be honest, when I was fighting Tenna, I had kind of assumed that I had missed the secret boss somewhere. I assumed it had something to do with the S-rank room, because I managed to get S-rank on board 2 my first try, but not on board 1, so I assumed, okay, I just missed the secret Shadow Crystal boss, I'll find out about it later. And then the Knight just comes out of nowhere. I keep reiterating that, but that's just how shocking it was to, at least me. The Knight comes out of nowhere, says, no, I'm the Shadow Crystal boss now, put him up, buckos, and then just whoops us, so that was a fun surprise. It was also nice getting to see Undyne throw spears at things again. That was also nice. And then the chapter ends. Instead of seeing the Chris do something spooky, we chase the Knight out of the house and then down into the bunker. Now again, I thought the bunker would only really become majorly relevant around chapter 6 at earliest, and I thought any other references were I thought it was just going to be an endgame area, so it would be put off until later. But no, after chapter 3, getting into the bunker becomes the main goal of the game, as far as we're concerned. At least right now. I'm going to come back to this later, when I kind of go a bit more in depth on my point here. But chapter 4, as well, is pretty dark compared to the other 3, or it at least feels a lot less bubbly, if that makes any sense. A lot of the whimsy that's present in the previous chapters is just absent in chapter 4. And if I could go full armchair psychologist for a moment, I think that's why people have kind of clung to Gerson so much, because he's kind of like this beacon of hope in an otherwise dreary chapter. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about how surprising the Knight showing up in chapter 3 was, but the fact that before we even got to chapter 5, we've already had a boss fight with the Knight, even if it was one where we ultimately end up losing, as well as a boss fight with a Titan, which we actually kill. But then again, I don't know if saying kill is the right term for the Titan. I think banishing it is more accurate. The whole line about the Titans not even understanding mercy, as well as the fact that Titans are supposed to be a representation of someone's fear of the dark, makes me think that they don't have emotions in the same way that we do. So, since they kind of lack that aspect of being a person, you can't really kill them as much as you're just banishing their physical form, if that makes any sense. I'm kind of going off nonsense here, but that's what I'm trying to get across. Also of note is how much more emotive Chris is in Chapter 4. For a while even before Chapters 3 and 4 came out, there were still people denying that Chris and the Soul were separate characters as much as people were thinking. I still saw a few people claiming that Chris was supposed to be a self-insert, but I feel like Chapter 4 very much kind of banishes that idea, to use Deltarune terminology, considering how much the Soul and Chris end up fighting throughout this chapter, at least during the Light World segments. Overall, I think Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 are very good, as an addition to what we got in Chapters 1 and 2, but that's not really going over about how the theories were destroyed, like the title of this video was talking about, so I want to go a bit more in depth on that. As I said earlier, most of us felt like we had some sort of idea of how the rest of the game was going to play out, at least up until the end game. People even had, concepts built up for, we'll go to this dark world in Chapter 3, this dark world in Chapter 4, we'll go to this dark world in Chapter 5, this world in Chapter 6, and then we'll end it out with the bunker in Chapter 7. And unlike the period between Chapters 1 and 2, where people were thinking that Chris was gonna do the silly Undertale bad route, and they'll fight Sans the Skeleton and Susie and all this yada yada yada. Unlike that period, we had so much more time to kind of sit on theories, and we knew that Toby wasn't going to go in that direction. So I feel like, at least looking back, the theories we made from Chapters 2, before Chapters 3 and 4, seemed a lot more reasonable compared to the ones people were making in between Chapters 1 and 2. And I think Toby knew that, because even in between Chapters 1 and 2, lots of people saw the Chris was secretly Kara idea that was floating around. I think lots of people knew that's not the direction the story was going in. Or, at least people who were believing in it weren't believing in it, completely unironically. My point being that Toby kind of knows how we see his characters and his world. Heck, he's been doing it, or he's kind of had witness to it for the last almost decade, jeez. But so he knows how we're kind of thinking about these things. Therefore, he would know the perfect way to subvert it without making it not make sense. Not that our theories have to hold up, because it's his story, we're just trying to predict it, so our theories don't really need to hold up when looking back. I'd like to point out that in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Susie seems excited to either go into the Dark World or be in the Dark World, especially by the end of Chapter 2, because at the end of Chapter 1 she wants to go back, she gets to go back, she gets to get closer with someone she cares about, she gets to save the day again, and she feels like she's really making a good difference, even if the seriousness of the situation hasn't sunk in yet. And in Chapter 3, even though a dark fountain has appeared out of nowhere while they were sleeping, and they don't even know how the Dark World was formed, Susie's very willing to just go along with things. The only real hit to her morale is when Ralsei gives his whole speech about darkness not being real. But even after that, she's more than willing to start playing Tenna's game show, and she's actually really enjoying it until it kind of starts to wear on her. But after the night appears, almost kidnaps Toriel, does kidnap Undyne, and flees to the bunker, her mood changes. When she sees the fountain, or when she opens the door to the church in Chapter 4 and sees there's a fountain there, she seems a lot more serious. She does kind of try to play up the cool girl act of yeah, we're not reasonable, we'll go in and chase it. But she's not looking at the fountains the same. She's not seeing them as fun adventures, she's seeing them as, okay, let's go fuck up the night, because the night is doing bad things. At this point, it's really starting to appear, or it's really starting to show how serious this whole situation is for the characters in universe. Because on a meta level, us as the audience know the roaring is going to happen eventually. We know it's going to happen, because why would they introduce the concept of it if it's never going to be paid off? But to Susie and Chris and Ralsei, their goal is they're preventing the roaring before it can even begin. It's going to be a huge loss to them when the roaring does begin, and it will be trying to minimize the damage from there on. Anyways, my point is that Chapters 3 and 4 played with what our expectations of the chapter would be in really interesting ways. not to throw any shade at my friends, but I even saw some people kind of talking about, it's like, oh, it sucks that we didn't have another chapter member, or like another party member in chapter 3, or another party member in chapter 4, and I think people are kind of not paying attention to how the story is setting things up, to put it kindly. There was never going to be a Firegrave route where we use Toriel to kill Undyne, because why would Toriel take orders from her kid? That doesn't make sense. Even as early as chapter 1, when inputting the name for your vessel or you, Noelle has always shown to have importance. It made sense that she was added as a party member in chapter 2, because that was her chapter to set up as a party member. Like how in chapter 1, it was the setup for Susie and Ralsei and Chris. Chapter 2 is about Noelle, whether that be you do the normal route and she learns to stand up for herself, or you do the Snowgrave route and murder people. Regardless, Noelle is important, maybe even more important than Chris, Susie, and Ralsei, and definitely more important than any of the other classmates like Snowy or Monster Kid or Caddy or Jockington. They don't really matter. Maybe Jockington does because of that one prophecy panel, but I don't know how to interpret that. Honestly, at best, I think the other classmates are going to get a Birdly moment, where they kind of just act as a minor antagonist or a minor protagonist for part of the chapter. Noelle is, I feel like, going to be the only major additional party member, but then again, I could be completely wrong, because that's the whole point of this video. We are trying to make rules on how the game is going to work when we don't even have all the pieces yet. The problem with theorizing about a game that isn't done yet is that we don't have all the pieces. We don't know how the story is going to be told, so we can't get too attached to making theories when they could be easily disproven in an instant. And that's not Toby trying to be, like, mocking us or laughing in our face like, haha, I proved your theory wrong. It's just that was never the direction the story was going to go in, and there's no harm in that because we just didn't know. Looking back, I think we were all a little eager or just got a little too excited and kind of saw Deltarune as an episodic TV show instead of, like, parts of a full story. Yes, each chapter contains its own sub-narrative, but as a whole, each chapter is a piece of the greater narrative. They don't have to follow some sort of cookie-cutter formula where X happens, then Y happens, then Z happens. I've seen multiple people bring this point up, but you kind of have to think of it like a book. Not each chapter is going to be the same. They're not going to follow the same structure because that would get kind of boring. Like Toby even said himself, Chapter 3 was a little bit more light on plot until the very end. Chapter 4 was heavy on plot and less gameplay focused, even though that was kind of a lie, because I feel like the whole darkness TP mechanic was really interesting. Regardless, each chapter is going to specialize in different things, they're going to focus on different things, and that's good. This also kind of carries over to the Snowgrave route, because it's not like each chapter will kind of corrupt another thing and kill a person. It's that little by little, over each chapter, when we interact with her, we're going to hurt Noelle a little bit more, and we're going to turn her into something. And what that is, we can't say yet, but that's the thing. The weird route isn't about, like, it's not really a route where it's not supposed to be like the genocide route from Undertale. It's just supposed to be its own story about how you're turning Noelle, like, you're kind of taking away the agency from Noelle. You're using your status as the player to impose your will on another, just like you did with Chris, but this time in a much more violent, forceful manner, in a much more willing manner, because at least with Chris, we had a vessel planned for us, but then it got robbed. With Noelle, we're actively going out of our way to impose our will on her. This is a bit of a silly comparison, but the way people were talking about chapters it kind of reminded me of how people used to talk about Smash predictions, at least during the Ultimate days, because that was the period of time I was more, I guess, aware of predictions. People had all these rules, until those rules were broken. Characters couldn't be this, or characters couldn't be that, and then a character was this, or a character was that. And I think we were kind of looking at Deltarune chapters in a similar way, or at least parts of the chapters. A secret boss had to fit this, it had to fit that. The secret boss was this and this and this. The main boss was this and that and that. But no, they don't have to follow any rules or patterns. I think it's just as people, we feel comfortable forming patterns where there might not be any. And I'll get to this in a moment, but I do think that was kind of the intention. In the time between chapters 2 and chapter 3, I think Toby knew that we were expecting things to go a certain way, which is why Chapter 3 played out as it did. It starts out all bubbly and nice, and then the knight quite literally kills the fun. The knight comes out of nowhere and slaughters Tenna, the embodiment of all the happiness and regularity in the chapter. Because I think that's Tenna's role. He's supposed to feel comfortable and familiar, even like in universe and out of universe. He reminds us of Spampton. He reminds us of other bosses like Queen or King. He makes us feel like, yeah, this is playing out exactly how we thought it would. And then the knight says, no, time to die. I'm killing your theories and Tenna, all in one motion. This might be silly, but I think chapters 5 and maybe even 6 aren't going to feel as important as chapter 3 and 4. At least on a meta level. And I'm not saying chapter 5 will be bad, of course. I'm just saying I think chapters 3 and 4 were important to kind of crush our idea of how we thought this game was going to play out. Because obviously chapter 7 is when things are probably going to get all meta and shit. And I want to talk about that more in another video, so please like and comment and subscribe if you want to see that video. Ding. No, but in all seriousness, chapters 3 and 4 were important to get us out of the mindset we were in and to get us ready for whatever the rest of Deltarune is going to look like. It's kind of funny, even though I made sure to write a whole script for this video. In fact, I spent most of the day writing the script. I took a break to upload my theory video, but I've been writing the script the rest of the day, and I just think it's kind of funny that, like, I was writing a script specifically so it doesn't feel like I'm coming off as a rambling madman, yet I feel like I'm already doing that. My next video is going to be about Gaster and his potential role in the story, and how I think he could or could not play into the story. But I hope that when that video comes out, anyone who watches that takes the point from this video that it doesn't really matter. This is for fun. I'm having fun talking about this game. Deltarune might become my favorite game of all time just because of the emotional connection I had to the journey of it coming together. And I think that's special, and I'm glad to be part of this. I'm a little worried I kind of tried to reiterate certain points a little too much, so I'm just going to go over things one last time to put the nail in that coffin. Going into Deltarune chapters 3 and 4, I'm sure a lot of us felt like we knew how the game was going to go. And then, to quote that one comment I keep seeing all over YouTube, Toby straight up said, move the knight to c3. And I think that's a really good pun. My point being that we don't know how Deltarune is going to play out, so I'm not saying don't make theories, I'm just saying don't get too invested. And just be ready to be surprised. That's the best thing about a game like this, is that we get to grow and change alongside the game, and I think that's beautiful. Anyways, like I said, my next video is kind of going to be about Gaster and how Deltarune might kind of play into some meta stuff in similar ways Undertale did. But that's for later. As of now, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. My goal is to reach 3,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm at 2.2 thousand right now, so if you like this video, just maybe consider subscribing. I like to think the videos I make are of some quality, and that's a lot for me considering my self-doubt. But I'm talking too much. Sorry, I should stop saying that. One last thing I'm going to talk about, this isn't relevant to the video, this is more relevant to the channel at large. I ended up turning off channel memberships just because I felt like I'm not in a place right now where I can give back to people giving me money, and I feel like I need to justify if people are going to directly give me money. So, in the future, I might make a Patreon or something, but for now, if you want to support me, just watching the videos and liking, subscribing, and maybe sharing with a friend is more than enough. Thank you, and have a good night.